My mom passed away when I was just 7 years old. It was a tough time for me and my dad. She'd been sick for a while, but we always hoped she'd pull through. Before she died, she made sure to leave me an inheritance. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to secure my future, college, maybe a down payment on a house someday. My dad was put in charge of the money. The rules were clear. It was only to be used for my needs and only in emergencies. I guess my mom knew how things might go down the line. For a few years, it was just me and my dad. We managed okay, but I could tell he was lonely. When I was 10, he met Louise. They hit it off right away and got married pretty quickly. Suddenly, I had a stepmom and an 8-year-old stepsister. It was an adjustment, but I tried to make the best of it. Then came my half-sister when I was 12. At first, everything seemed fine, but as she grew, we all noticed something wasn't quite right. The doctors kept saying she'd grow out of it, but deep down, I think we all knew it was more serious than that. When she was 2, we finally got a diagnosis. It was some rare condition I can't even pronounce. The good news was that it wasn't life-threatening. The bad news? Without treatment, she could end up permanently disabled. That's when things really started to go downhill. My dad and Louise were desperate to find a treatment. They finally found one, but it was crazy expensive. There were ways to get financial help, but that would take time. Time my dad said we didn't have. One night, about 5 months ago, my dad called me into the living room. Louise was there too, sitting quietly on the couch. I could tell something was up. Dad started talking about my inheritance. He explained that they had found a treatment for my sister, but it was expensive. He said they needed to use some of my inheritance to pay for it. I was shocked. I told him no, reminding him that the money was for my future and that Mom had left it for me. Dad tried to reason with me, saying it was an emergency and that my sister needed the treatment. I asked if there were other ways to get the money and if we could wait for those options. But Dad insisted we didn't have time to wait and that he was going to use the money anyway. I got angry and told him he couldn't do that it wasn't his to use. That's when Louise decided to join in. She accused me of being selfish, asking how I could look at my sister and say no to helping her. I defended myself, saying it wasn't selfish to want to keep what was rightfully mine. I warned my dad that if he took the money, I'd never forgive him. He tried to dismiss my concerns, saying I'd understand when I'm older and that sometimes we have to make hard choices for family. I reminded him that Mom was specific about how the money could be used, that it was only for my needs. Dad argued that Mom was gone and that he was sure she'd understand if she were here. I shot back that she wasn't here and that I'd never understand or forgive this. Then I turned to Louise, my anger boiling over. I told her never to speak to me again, calling her disgusting for encouraging stealing from me and taking my mom's money for her daughter. I stormed out of the room. I knew I had to do something, so I called my grandparents, my mom's parents. They'd always been good to me, and I knew they had a copy of Mom's will. After I explained everything, they were furious. They'd always been friendly with my dad, even after Mom died. Grandpa would even fix Dad's car for free. But all that stopped the moment they heard what he was planning to do. A week ago, my dad confronted me again. He was angry, saying my grandparents had cut him off and he couldn't figure out why. When he asked what I told them, I simply said I told them the truth, that he was stealing my inheritance to pay for his daughter's treatment. Dad tried to argue that it wasn't stealing, that it was for my sister. I corrected him, saying, half-sister, and insisted it didn't matter because the money was mine, left by my mom for my future. He then accused me of being heartless and selfish. I asked him how I was being heartless and selfish for wanting to keep what's mine and honor my mom's wishes. I told him he was the selfish one. Dad warned me that I'd regret this when I'm older and that I'd see he made the right choice. I told him that I wouldn't regret it and that I'd never forget what he did. I accused him of choosing his new family over Mom's last wish for me, saying it was something I could never forgive. He stormed off, probably hoping I'd cool down and change my mind. But I won't. I've already talked to a lawyer, and we're working on getting control of my inheritance transferred to my grandparents. Dad's not happy about it, but there's not much he can do. The will is clear, and he violated its terms. Louise has been giving me the cold shoulder, which is fine by me. My half-sister doesn't understand what's going on, and I feel bad for her. But this isn't her fault, and it's not her money. My relationship with my dad is pretty much over. He made his choice, and now he has to live with the consequences. I'm counting down the days until I can move out and start my own life with the future my mom wanted for me. I met my husband in college. We were both studying engineering, and we hit it off immediately. He was kind, funny, and incredibly smart. We dated for 4 years before tying the knot. That's when I first met his parents. From the moment I shook hands with my mother-in-law, I knew something was off. Her smile didn't reach her eyes, and her grip was a little too tight. My husband had warned me that she could be protective, but I wasn't prepared for the constant criticism and passive-aggressive comments that followed. Over the years, it only got worse. Every holiday, every family gathering, she'd find ways to tear me down. My cooking wasn't good enough. My career choices were questionable. Even the way I folded laundry was wrong, according to her. My husband tried to mediate, but he was caught between his wife and his mother, and I didn't want to make things harder for him. Fast forward to last week. My in-laws decided to come stay with us for a few days. I was dreading it, but I put on a brave face for my husband's sake. The first couple of days were tense but manageable. Then came that fateful morning. I woke up early, as usual, wearing my normal sleep attire, shorts and a tank top. Nothing revealing, just comfortable. I made my way to the kitchen, brewed some coffee, and sat down at the table to enjoy the quiet morning. My father-in-law joined me shortly after. He's always been the more reasonable of the two, and we actually get along quite well. He politely asked if he could join me, and I welcomed him, mentioning that the coffee was fresh if he wanted some. We chatted about family, work, and his golf game. It was pleasant, and for a moment I forgot about the tension in the house. That is, until my mother-in-law walked in. She got her coffee and sat down next to her husband, staring at me with narrowed eyes. I tried to ignore it, but after a few uncomfortable minutes, she spoke up. She asked me in a hostile tone if I enjoyed having my breasts on display for her husband. I was so shocked, I nearly choked on my coffee. When I asked her to repeat herself, she did so, questioning if I thought it was appropriate to parade around half-naked in front of a married man. I was shocked and furious. 20 years of pent-up frustration came bubbling to the surface. I snapped back at her, saying it was just a tank top. Then, in a moment of madness, I told her that if I really wanted to show her husband my breasts, I'd do this, and I actually pulled up my shirt and flashed my father-in-law. As soon as I did it, I knew I'd made a huge mistake. My face turned beet red, and I ran to my room, mortified. I heard my mother-in-law stomping to the guest room, and within minutes I heard suitcases being dragged down the hallway. The front door slammed, and they were gone. Panicking, I called my husband, who was away on a business trip. I was sobbing as I explained what happened. I apologized profusely, saying I didn't know what came over me and that I'd ruined everything. To my surprise, my husband started laughing. Not just a chuckle, but full-on belly laughs. When I asked if he was mad, he said he was proud of me for finally standing up to his mother. He mentioned that she had been horrible to me for years and suggested that maybe this would finally shut her up. His reaction made me feel a little better, but I still felt guilty. I tried calling my mother-in-law to apologize, but she wouldn't answer my calls. A week has passed, and I haven't heard from them. My husband says his mom is refusing to speak to either of us. Part of me feels terrible, but another part feels relieved. For the first time in 20 years, I don't have to worry about her constant judgment and criticism. Yesterday, a package arrived at our door. Inside was a collection of turtlenecks and a note that simply said, "For the sake of decency." I recognized my mother-in-law's handwriting immediately. I looked at the pile of clothes and started laughing. Then I did something I never thought I'd do. I took a picture of myself wearing one of the turtlenecks and nothing else. I sent it to my husband with a cheeky caption asking if he thought his mom would approve. He responded with a string of laughing emojis and a message expressing his love for me. I don't know what the future holds for our family dynamics, but I do know one thing: I'm done being pushed around. If my mother-in-law wants to act like a Karen, well, two can play at that game, and I've got a whole wardrobe of turtlenecks to work with now. I met my ex when we were both fresh out of college. We hit it off right away, and things moved pretty fast. Within a year, we were married, and not long after that, we had our son. At first, everything seemed perfect. We were young, in love, and had a beautiful baby boy. But as time went on, cracks started to show in our relationship. My ex became increasingly controlling and manipulative. She'd guilt-trip me into doing things her way, and any time I tried to assert myself, she'd threaten to leave and take our son with her. I felt trapped, walking on eggshells in my own home. Things came to a head when our son was about 5. I finally gathered the courage to stand up for myself and file for divorce. That's when all hell broke loose. My ex went ballistic, throwing every accusation she could think of at me. She tried to paint me as an unfit father, claiming I was neglectful and abusive. It was all lies, of course, but it didn't make the process any less painful. The custody battle was brutal. My ex was determined to get full custody and relegate me to a weekend dad. She thought she'd be able to live off the child support and have complete control over our son's life. But her aggressive tactics backfired spectacularly. The judge saw right through her lies and manipulations. In the end, we got shared custody, but with a whole bunch of rules put in place to keep my ex in check. These rules didn't affect me at all, but they drove her crazy. She couldn't believe her plan had fallen apart so completely. Fast forward to now, and my son is 8 years old. We've been co-parenting for a few years, and while it hasn't been smooth sailing, I've always made sure to put my son's needs first. That's why when my ex told me about her housing situation, I knew I had to step in. It all started when she called me one day, sounding frantic. She told me she needed to talk about something important. When I asked what was going on, she explained that she was moving to a new place on October 1st and had already given notice to her landlord. I asked for more details, and she revealed that the new place had fallen through because the landlord made a mistake on the rent and wanted $500 more a month, which she couldn't afford. When I asked what she was going to do, she said she was looking for another place, but might be without housing for a few weeks. That's when alarm bells started ringing in my head. I asked if she was seriously considering being homeless with our son. She tried to downplay it, saying it wasn't like that and it was just temporary. I told her I didn't care if it was temporary, our son would not be homeless when he was with her, period. She accused me of being unreasonable, insisting it wasn't like they'd be on the streets. I said I didn't care if she ended up living in a tent for 3 weeks. Our son wouldn't be a part of it. She actually got mad at me for saying that, which told me everything I needed to know. She was totally fine with the idea of our son being homeless. A few days later, she called me again. She said she'd found a temporary place to stay and gave me the address. I looked it up. It was a motel, and not just any motel. This place was partially used as a halfway house for ex-cons and recovering addicts. I confronted her about it, asking if she was kidding and stating that our son wasn't going to live in a halfway house motel. She tried to downplay it, saying it wasn't that bad and I was exaggerating. I told her she could stay there if she wanted, but our son wasn't setting foot in that place. She then demanded that I help pay for her stay somewhere else. I refused, telling her this was her problem, not mine. We got into a heated argument, and I finally had to put my foot down. I told her I was bringing in my lawyer because this was unacceptable. She then suggested an easier way, pointing out that the motel wasn't in the same city as our son's school district, which was a requirement in our custody agreement. She was right about that. We both had to live within the school district boundaries, or the parent who did would get primary custody. I saw an opportunity to protect my son without a long, drawn-out legal battle. I had my lawyer draft a letter to my ex, stating that if she wasn't living within the school district boundaries, she'd be violating our custody arrangement. We made it clear that immediate action would be taken, including calling the sheriff if necessary. When she got the letter, She panicked and called her lawyer. They tried to find some middle ground, but I wasn't having it, especially when they had the audacity to ask me to pay for her motel stay while our son stayed with me. I refused to pay for her stay at the sketchy motel while our son stayed with me. She argued that it was only fair since I was getting more time with him. I pointed out that she was the one who put herself in this situation, and I wasn't going to enable her poor choices. I told my lawyer to tell them to go take a hike, and just like that, my son has been staying with me full-time for the whole month. My ex is furious, of course. She's stuck with a $1,500 legal bill and a $2,000 motel bill, and she has the nerve to blame me for it all. She accused me of trying to keep our son away from her, but I explained that I was trying to keep our son safe and stable and that she brought all of this on herself. She then accused me of loving the situation, seeing her struggle while I played the hero dad. I refuted this, saying I wasn't playing anything, just being a responsible parent. I pointed out that she thought she was going to get full custody and make me a weekend dad, living off child support, but now she was living in a motel with drug addicts and ex-cons, broke and bitter. She called me a jerk and said I wouldn't want our son staying with me in a place like that either. I agreed with her on that point, but explained that I also wouldn't put myself in that situation in the first place. I emphasized that the difference was that I always put our son's needs first. She hung up on me after that, but I didn't care. My son is safe, happy, and thriving. He has his own room at my place, though he often prefers to sleep in my bed, a pool to swim in, and tons of neighborhood kids to play with. His life hasn't been disrupted at all, and that's what matters most to me. My ex has lost time with our son, racked up bills she can't afford, and shown her true colors to everyone involved. I don't feel an ounce of sympathy for her. She made her bed, and now she has to lie in it, even if that bed is in a sketchy motel. I grew up thinking I knew the story of my family. My mom told me my biological father didn't want anything to do with me. Simple as that. I believed her when she said she met my stepdad when I was 2. Turns out that was all a lie. The truth? My mom had an affair. My stepdad was actually her husband when she got pregnant with me. He left because he didn't want to raise another man's kid, but he missed her, so they got back together when I was 2. Lucky me, right? He always hated me, never let me forget I wasn't his. My childhood? Let's just say it wasn't exactly a fairy tale. When I turned 18, I decided to do one of those DNA ancestry tests. That's when the real bomb dropped. I found my biological father, all right, but instead of some heartwarming reunion, I got a big fat rejection. Not just from him, but his whole family. They made it crystal clear there was no room for me in their lives. I made the mistake of telling people about it. You know what they said? One person suggested I reach out to my siblings or cousins, insisting that surely someone would want to know me. When I explained that the whole family had rejected me, another person pushed the idea of contacting them individually, wondering if maybe my grandparents would be interested. It was like talking to a brick wall. They couldn't understand that I wasn't willing to set myself up for more rejection, so I stopped telling people. It was easier that way. My wife knew the whole story. She was the only one I could trust with it. I never told her parents the full truth, though. Just said I couldn't find my biological father. Figured it would save me from their well-meaning but misguided advice. So there I was, enjoying my Saturday, playing video games while my wife was out of town with her friends. Then, out of the blue, my in-laws show up. My father-in-law said we needed to talk, and when I asked what was up, my mother-in-law dropped the bomb that it was about my biological father. I felt my stomach drop. My father-in-law explained that they had overheard my wife and me talking about being rejected by my biological family. I tried to brush it off, saying it wasn't a big deal and that it happened a long time ago. But my in-laws weren't having it. My mother-in-law said they understood why I hadn't told them the whole truth before, but they were there to convince me to take the leap I had refused to make in the past. My father-in-law urged me to find more family members and reach out to them. I tried to express my appreciation for their concern while saying that I wasn't interested. I explained that I'd been rejected by enough people who were supposed to care about me, and that I wasn't willing to go through that again. My mother-in-law insisted that I think about the potential happiness it could bring, suggesting that I never knew if a blood relative might want to know me. My father-in-law told me not to let fear make decisions for me, and my mother-in-law even went as far as to say that as the parental figures in my life now, I should listen to them. I could feel my patience wearing thin. I took a deep breath and asked them to please respect my decision and drop the subject. But they wouldn't let up. My father-in-law argued that while I wasn't wrong, I wasn't right either, and that multiple people giving me the same advice couldn't be wrong. My mother-in-law accused me of denying myself an opportunity. That was it. I'd had enough. I told them to stop telling me what to do, emphasizing that this was my life and my decision. I insisted that they mind their own business and stay in their lane instead of trying to bulldoze what they thought was best. When my father-in-law tried to interrupt, I cut him off. I made it clear that I'd made my choice, and if they couldn't respect that, then I was going to have to ask them to leave. They looked shocked. My mother-in-law protested that they were just trying to help, but I said I hadn't asked for their help and didn't want it, and again asked them to leave. They left, fuming. I could hear them saying how ungrateful I was as they walked to their car. I didn't care. I was done letting other people dictate how I should feel about my family situation. When my wife got back, I told her what happened. She was furious with her parents. She apologized, insisting it wasn't my fault, and immediately decided to call them. I could hear her in the other room, giving her parents an earful. She demanded to know how they dared to ambush me like that, telling them that I had made my decision clear and they should have respected it. She refused to hear their excuses and insisted they owed me an apology. Oh, she came back, looking both angry and apologetic. She assured me that her parents wouldn't be bothering me about this again, saying she had made sure of it. It was nice to have someone in my corner, someone who understood and respected my choices. The next day, my phone rang. It was my father-in-law. He admitted that while they still thought I was making a mistake, they shouldn't have pushed me like that. He assured me it wouldn't happen again. It wasn't exactly an apology, but I knew it was the best I was going to get. I appreciated my wife standing up for me, but I also knew this wasn't over. People always think they know what's best for you, especially when it comes to family. But you know what? I'm done letting others decide what family means to me. I've got my wife, and that's all the family I need right now. Maybe someday I'll change my mind about reaching out to my biological relatives, but that'll be my choice to make. No one else's. My girlfriend and I met in college, both studying engineering. I thought we were a perfect match, logical, practical, and easygoing. At least, that's what I believed until this whole milk fiasco. A couple of nights ago, we were driving back from a late-night study session at the library. Both of us were tired and hungry, so we decided to stop at the convenience store near our apartment. We grabbed some snacks, and my girlfriend picked up a small carton of chocolate milk with a straw attached. I remember thinking how cute it was that she still enjoyed those little kid drinks. The next day, my girlfriend had to leave early for a group project meeting. I woke up later, feeling groggy and in need of a pick-me-up. That's when I saw it in the fridge, that little carton of chocolate milk. It looked so tempting, and before I knew it, I was drinking it. As I finished the last drop, I felt a twinge of guilt. I knew it wasn't mine, but I figured I could easily replace it. So, later that day, I stopped by the same convenience store and bought an identical carton of chocolate milk. I put it in the fridge and thought nothing more of it. A day passed, and I had completely forgotten about the whole thing. My girlfriend and I were relaxing on the couch when she suddenly got up to get her chocolate milk. I heard her rummaging in the fridge, and then she called out to me, asking if I had drunk her chocolate milk. I admitted that I had, but explained that I had replaced it with the same brand. She then pointed out that the new carton didn't have a straw attached. I felt my stomach drop. I hadn't even noticed that the replacement didn't have a straw. I tried to think quickly. I apologized and explained that I hadn't realized it didn't have a straw. I suggested she could use the straw from the plain milk I had also bought. But my girlfriend wasn't satisfied. She questioned why I hadn't told her I drank her milk in the first place. I tried to explain that I didn't think it was a big deal since I had replaced it. She argued that I should have asked first or at least told her afterward. I apologized again, saying I didn't think it would matter, and that if she had done the same to me, I wouldn't have cared. She retorted that she wasn't me, and that it bothered her that I had done this behind her back. What followed was an hour-long discussion about respect, communication, and apparently the sanctity of chocolate milk. I tried to explain my thought process, but she just wouldn't let it go. I repeated my apology and explained that I didn't mean to upset her, thinking that since I replaced the milk, it wouldn't be an issue. She insisted that I should have told her, asking what if she had been looking forward to drinking it all day. When I asked if she actually had been, she said that wasn't the point. I suggested she might be overreacting a bit, saying it was just milk. She countered that it wasn't about the milk, but about me not respecting her things. I argued that I did respect her things, which was why I replaced the milk. She pointed out that I didn't replace it properly since the new one didn't have a straw. I reminded her that I had offered the straw from the plain milk, but she insisted it wasn't the same. This back and forth continued for what felt like an eternity. I couldn't believe we were having such a heated argument over something so trivial. I mean, we're both adults, right? Shouldn't we be able to handle something like this maturely? As the argument went on, I started to feel frustrated. I had apologized, explained my reasoning, and offered a solution. What more did she want from me? I expressed my frustration, saying I had apologized multiple times, explained my actions, and offered another straw. I asked what else she wanted me to do. She said she wanted me to understand why this bothered her so much. I admitted I was trying to understand, but thought she was making a mountain out of a molehill. She accused me of dismissing her feelings, which I denied, saying I just thought the whole situation was ridiculous. She then asked if I thought her feelings were ridiculous, which I quickly denied. The argument continued to spiral. What had started as a simple misunderstanding about a carton of milk had turned into a full-blown relationship crisis. As the night wore on, neither of us seemed willing to budge from our positions. My girlfriend insisted that I had betrayed her trust, while I maintained that the whole situation was being blown out of proportion. Finally, exhausted and frustrated, I decided to end the conversation. I told her I didn't think we were getting anywhere, that I had apologized, explained myself, and tried to make it right. I said if she couldn't accept that, I didn't know what else to say. She tersely replied, "Fine, whatever." She took off to the bedroom, leaving me alone on the couch, wondering how a simple carton of chocolate milk could cause so much drama. The next morning, things were still tense between us. My girlfriend left for class without saying goodbye, and I was left to ponder the events of the previous night. I realized that perhaps I had underestimated the importance of communication in our relationship, even for small things like drinking someone else's milk. But at the same time, I couldn't shake the feeling that her reaction was disproportionate to the situation. Was this a sign of bigger problems in our relationship? Only time would tell. As I grabbed my keys to head out, I looked at the fridge. That innocent carton of chocolate milk sat there, a silent witness to the chaos it had caused. I shook my head at how such a small thing could lead to such a big argument. My husband and I always dreamed of having our own space, a little sanctuary where we could be ourselves without worrying about anyone else. We worked hard to make that dream come true, saving every penny we could for years. Finally, at 29, we bought our first home. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was ours. We were so excited to start this new chapter of our lives. We had plans, you know. We wanted to redecorate, maybe start thinking about having kids. But life has a funny way of throwing curveballs at you when you least expect it. When my sister called me in tears, she and her husband were struggling to make ends meet in the big city. They'd lost their apartment and needed a place to stay while they got back on their feet. Of course, I couldn't say no. She's my sister, my best friend. We've always had each other's backs. So we opened our doors to them. It was supposed to be temporary, just 3 months, 6 at the most. We figured we could handle that. But here we are, a year later, and they're still here. Don't get me wrong, I love my sister, but this situation is starting to wear on us. My husband and I, we've always been passionate. We used to enjoy our privacy, if you know what I mean. Now we're tiptoeing around our own house, trying not to make noise. It's frustrating, to say the least. We tried to be considerate at first. We'd wait until the middle of the night or early morning when everyone was asleep. But it's our house, you know? We shouldn't have to schedule our intimate moments around other people's sleep patterns. So, we decided to stop holding back. We figured, hey, it's our house. We should be able to enjoy each other without worrying about it. But apparently, that didn't sit well with our house guests. One morning, as I was making coffee, my sister approached me with a frown on her face. She asked if we could talk, and I agreed, wondering what was up. She hesitantly brought up the noise, and when I asked for clarification, she explained that they could hear my husband and me at night. I felt my face heat up. I knew where this was going, but I wasn't about to apologize for enjoying my husband in my own home. My sister went on to say that she found it disrespectful and asked if we could quiet down. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool. I explained that while I understood it might be uncomfortable for her, this was our house, and we'd been trying to be considerate for a year. I suggested that maybe that was long enough. She protested, saying we were family and implying we should continue to accommodate them. I pointed out that it was precisely because we were family that we'd put up with the situation for so long, but we needed our space back. My sister looked shocked. She asked if I was telling them to leave. I clarified that it had been a year, far longer than the original 3 to 6 months they were supposed to stay, and suggested it was time they found their own place. She argued that they were still struggling, mentioning her husband's situation. I reminded her that her husband had gone through 3 jobs in the past year and had even taken a month off because he didn't want to work. I suggested this might be part of their problem. My sister's face turned red. She defended her husband, claiming he was trying his best. I questioned this, pointing out that from my perspective, it seemed like he was comfortable living off our generosity. She became indignant, again bringing up that we were family. I agreed, but explained that because we were family, I was being honest with her. I told her this couldn't go on forever, and they needed to start making plans to move out. My sister slammed the door to the guest room behind her. This wasn't just about the noise. It was about reclaiming our lives. That evening, my husband came home from work to find a tense atmosphere in the house. I filled him in on what had happened. He agreed it was about time we said something, expressing his love for my sister, but acknowledging the situation was getting out of hand. I shared my worry about ruining our relationship with my sister, but my husband reassured me that if she couldn't understand our position, that was on her, not me. The next few days were awkward, to say the least. My sister and her husband barely spoke to us, shooting us dirty looks whenever we were in the same room. But I noticed something else, too. They were spending a lot of time on their phones, looking at apartment listings. A week later, my sister approached me again. She told me that they had found a place and would be moving out the following week. I expressed my happiness for them, but she responded cynically, accusing me of not truly caring and making my feelings about them clear. I defended myself, pointing out that we had supported them for a year and just needed our space back. She dismissed my explanation, warning us not to expect many visits from them after this. I loved my sister, but I knew this was for the best. We needed to set boundaries, to have our own lives again. The day they moved out, my sister barely said goodbye. Her husband didn't say anything at all. That night, for the first time in a year, my husband and I didn't have to worry about being quiet. We enjoyed each other's company without any restrictions. It felt liberating, like we were finally home again. When we were laying in bed afterward, my husband turned to me. He asked if we had done the right thing. I responded that I believed we did what we had to do, explaining that we couldn't put our lives on hold forever. He agreed but expressed his concern about family. I acknowledged his feelings but reminded him that we were family too, and we deserved to live our lives the way we wanted in our own home. He nodded, pulling me close. I knew one thing for sure. We had reclaimed our space, our sanctuary, and that was worth fighting for. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more stories like this. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. And if you have any thoughts or suggestions, drop them in the comments below. We love hearing from you. See you in the next video.